Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. Hmm, still kind of hot. Didn't scald myself, obviously. um, anyway, for news for today, we really only have one major piece of news, and major's kind of stretching it a little bit, but it is a piece of news nonetheless. Wizards has released Minsk and Boo's Journal of Villainy on DM's Guild. It is honestly kind of I can't really tell exactly what it is. I haven't had a chance to super check it out yet. I just found out about it before I started recording this. But all of the proceeds from this little module thing that they've got here is are going to Extra Life, which again we talked about it during D&D celebration. But Extra Life is a charity that puts games in hospitals for kids, which I mean it's hard to find a more like good guy kind of charity than that, really. Like, right, like put smiles on kids' faces by putting games in their hands while they're stuck in the hospital going through a terrible, terrible thing. Um, so if you're able to, definitely go check that out. Definitely go support them, or donate directly to Extra Life. This way, you just get a little something from it, other than knowing that you're helping out a kid or several kids with having a good time while they're stuck in the not so great place. Um, I believe it's some kind of like journal of their adventures or something. It makes the way that they framed it made me think that it was less like adventure-y and more like, here are some stat blocks for some guys that we might have run into over our travels through the multiverse. It's hard to they're fictional characters, so like they could do whatever they want, but not really the point. The only other real piece of D&D news is once again on Friday. There is New York City Comic Con. It's the Comic Con is more than just Friday, but on Friday there is the big Critical Role preview for Legend of Vox Machina, if that's what you're into. Otherwise, I'm sure there's going to be some other D&D content going on at Comic Con, because it's just kind of a big old nerd fest, and nerd fest usually means that there's some kind of D&D there. I don't know. I don't have a better way to explain that and describe that. In terms of streams that are happening today, the only one that I know of is the wow, my words are really just sort of not my friend right now. The most recent episode. Ooh, I bumped the table. Most recent episode of the Seven. So over on Dropout.tv from Dimension 20, the Seven. I believe it's their 8th episode, which should be pretty darn good. If you've been keeping up with it, it has been building pretty consistently in intensity, and they are coming towards the final act of this show. I'm pretty sure it ends on sometime before the end of October, which is unfortunate because it has been really good and it's been a lot of fun to watch, and this group has a really great chemistry. So if you haven't seen it yet, I know that the first episode is on YouTube for free, so go check that out. If you are on the fence about it, it's got a phenomenal cast, and Bren, there's a reason he's one of the gold standards for DMing. He really knows how to run a game. That is everything for news and for streams. Moving on to TND. Today I have a Wildberry Chamomile blend tea. It's very good. It's very fruity. I know that's not necessarily always everybody's favorite thing when they're having tea, but I think it's very good. And it's in a, you can't, that's his stomach, a Scooby-Doo mug. I don't have a good reason for, or I don't have an explanation past, it's a Scooby-Doo mug. It's a fun Scooby-Doo mug. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, man. So that is that. And today we are going to move on, and now we are going to move on to our topic for today, which is going to be familiars as a whole. Last week, I know I talked about Unfamiliar, which is the third-party supplement that I'm super excited to run, where you get to play as released Wizards familiars. And after talking about that and thinking about it a little bit, I realized that I felt like I should go into a little bit more depth on what a familiar is, how they work, that sort of thing, because it's not even that it's complicated. It's just that it is an overlooked thing by newer players to D&D often. Once you play a character that has one, or you see somebody play one that has one, it becomes something that you feel like you almost can't live without in your game. So every chance you get to be a spellcaster that has it, you will probably take it. So familiars are fey spirits that have been conjured and bound in some way to a particular person who can cast the spell Find Familiar. They take the form of tiny beast. There's a whole list of them that you can have, including bats, birds, crabs, ferrets, cats, that sort of thing. Like just your normal, like almost pet things. I know I said crab and bat in there, but just stick with me on there. There's also an octopus in that list for some reason. But just just hang with it. Not really the point. In addition to casting the Find Familiar spell, you could also be a Pact of the Chain Warlock, who I actually think might get Find Familiar as a spell, but Pact of the Chain, like it sort of depends entirely on you having a familiar in your service at that point. It also expands your familiar options by a little bit, which is cool because then you can add things like Pseudo Dragon or Imp or Quasit, and I think that might be all three of them, but there might be another one that I'm forgetting about. I don't have it written down, so I'm going to say that those are the three that you can do. Anyway, they are these fey or fiendish little spirits that are bound to you and they take the form of this. They are always friendly to you and your allies, and they follow your instruction pretty much to a T, to the letter, essentially. Now, the thing about Find Familiar is that it fills that thing that all early D&D players seem to want for some reason, which is it fills the need for a pet, and it gives that pet rules that it can actually follow, and it makes it easier for the DM to like operate with then, because it is this Fey spirit. One, it can't be killed. It is sent back to the Feywild if it would be reduced to 0 hit points and killed because of it. So you're never like murdering a puppy or something like that. So that's a good, like, moral high ground victory kind of thing for the DM. But it allows it to do a bunch of these things, but it very specifically in the Find Familiar spell removes the attack action from the stat block of whatever creature your familiar is taking the form of, which is important because so often people want to use their pets as like these super crazy combat animals, but it's also like a 6-pound cat, and so that doesn't really like add up and jive super well, right? I on occasion have ruled that it works in specifically non-combat scenarios where it is being used as a distraction more than anything else. I will let the familiars take the attack action by just like essentially scratching them or biting at them or something like that. It doesn't really deal a whole lot of damage. It doesn't do much of anything like that, but they are technically using the attack action in that moment. But it is being used not as a combat tactic, but as a distraction tactic in a more social scenario or a stealth-based mission type thing or whatever. Another really cool thing about familiars is that you can communicate telepathically with your familiar. If they're within 100 feet of you, you can set up your telepathic link, and you can tell them what you want them to do, and they will go do it and follow your instructions. And out to any range that... The way it's framed in the actual spell leads to a little bit of confusion and a little bit of debate, but if you follow the rules of English very specifically here, you can communicate with your familiar while it is within 100 feet of you, and then the next sentence says, additionally, you can use an action to see through your familiar's eyes and hear through its ears. While you're doing so, you are deaf and blind to your immediate surroundings. And the way that it's structured brings up a little bit of a debate where it's like, can you only do that while it's within 100 feet of you? But again, if you follow those English rules very specifically, you can do it out to any distance. So it can be, clear across a city or something, and you can do that. This is a phenomenal tool for scouting and reconnaissance and that sort of thing. It's really great for spying on people if you have... like a very small, like if your familiar is a rat or something, it can get into walls and stuff, and it can go and spy on these enemies, allies, whoever it is that you're trying to spy on and check in on, which is a really, really great tool because when they're stealthed out like that, they are just a creature that is there, as opposed to if you were to do scrying or something like that, and somebody were to cast something like, see invisibility, suddenly they can see the sensor and they can just get rid of the sensor for scrying, and then you can't scry on them anymore. So A familiar is really, really great in that regard. On top of being able for you to issue it commands while it's within 100 feet of you, and for you to be able to see and hear through it out to any distance that you want, you can snap it out of existence as an action. And when I say out of existence, I mean you can make it disappear from the material plane, and it resides in a harmless demi plane. There we go. Until you decide you want to call it back again, at which point you snap it back into existence at any point within 30 feet of you. I don't believe it says that you have to be able to see it. You might have to. I'm not sure. I'm going to operate on the assumption that you do, because it's easier to say that and then be wrong about that than the other way around, and people take my advice. So we're going to say you have to see the space. But if you are stuck on one side of like this walled off, fenced off estate, essentially, and the house is within 30 feet of the fence that you are standing next to, and there is a balcony up there that has clearly got like an open window or a door that is slid open a little bit, you can just snap, put your familiar there, and then go into its senses and walk around as your familiar, doing a little bit of scouting in this house that you are trying to get into without actually having to enter on your own, which is awesome. Yes, if your familiar gets caught by guards, you are more than likely going to lose your familiar's service until you can cast the spell again, which is okay. It's not the best, but, it's not the worst either. The material component, the cost, essentially, of casting this spell, it's an hour-long casting time, so it costs you an hour of your time, and 10 gold pieces worth of charcoal incense that must be burned in a brass brazier, so you're really not out that much cash either, which is honestly pretty nice for something that is such a utility juggernaut in the same way that this is. So in addition to it being great for scouting, in addition to it being great for a bunch of other things like that, it can be used in combat. Like I said before, it cannot attack anything, but that is the only action that has been removed from its action economy list, essentially. It can still take the help action, which is great. You can have it go and give you the help action to give you advantage on whatever the thing you're trying to do is. It can have the use object action, so it can use technically it can use a wand, like a wand of fireballs or something like that. But more specifically, it can go like pull a lever for you. It can go do something like that. And talking, more often than not, is a free action on your turn. So you can yell out commands to it or telepathically give it commands, as long as it's within 100 feet of you, on this battlefield to go do different things in order to actually help change the dynamic of the battlefield. It can't attack, but that doesn't mean that it can't go pull that lever way over there. It can't go give the barbarian the help action so they have advantage on their attack or something like that. All for the cost of a first level spell. And there's no restriction on it like there is on a druid's wild shape. You can have a flying familiar from the get-go. If you want to have a sparrow as your familiar that hops around on your shoulder and then flies out and does stuff for you, that's cool. You can do that. You're not limited to, strictly walking things with no swimming, no flying speed, and then you pick up swimming speed, and then you pick up flying speed. You can just have it all from the get-go, which is phenomenal. Sure, you can't transport yourself on it necessarily, but still, the ability to do all of these other things is fantastic. If for whatever reason you end up in a situation where you need to change the form of your familiar, or it's not going to work like that, like let's say you have your sparrow buddy and you need to go underwater, well, your sparrow is not really going to do super well underwater, so you have two options. You can either snap it out of existence and have it hang out and wait for you until you need it again, or you can spend an hour and the same amount of material cost, to turn it into an octopus or a fish or something like that. And then you are able to use that in whatever the new environment is. And you also get the benefits and skills and features of the familiar when you are using it to do things. So if you have a familiar that is proficient in stealth, particularly, it has a bonus to its stealth when it is trying to sneak in somewhere. If you have a familiar that has dark vision, it can see in the dark when you can't necessarily if you're in like a dark cave or something. Um, if you watch Critical Role Campaign 2 from the get go, Caleb, Liam O'Brien's character, has Frumpkin, the cat, that he uses to phenomenal degree for a very, very long time, all throughout the campaign. If you watch Dimension 20, which I mentioned earlier, let's see, I believe it's the second season of Fantasy High. There is more than one familiar that comes into the picture, and they use it. They use it more specifically for the help action a lot, but it emphasizes the mechanical utility of it. In addition to Liam emphasizing the roleplay at oh wow, the roleplay ability of having a familiar. Um, so it the familiars are really just a phenomenal extra little party member that you can have on your side pretty much at any time. And the great thing about it is any character can get a familiar, right? Because there is a feat in 5th edition called Magic Initiate. If you take the Magic Initiate and you choose the Wizard class, and then you take, you get 2 cantrips and a first level spell, I believe. If you take that first level spell as Find Familiar, you can suddenly have a familiar, because your familiar just sort of lasts until it's not around anymore, or you cast the spell again, or something like that. And even if you cast the spell again, it just takes a different form. So if you're a barbarian, you can take this feat. You can cast Find Familiar when you're not raging, and then when you start raging, you still have your familiar because it doesn't like magically disappear because suddenly you're raging. It doesn't disappear when you go unconscious. When you die, it doesn't stick around super easily necessarily all the time. I'm pretty sure they don't lay it out. I don't have written down that they lay it out explicitly in the book, but there are plenty of advice columns on that. Usually, if you can like get zapped back up, it's not a big deal. But you're the one that's binding it there, so if you die for longer than like a minute, it might start to fade out just a little bit. Not really the point, though. Also, DMs, feel free to give familiars as like boons if it feels right for whatever reason. We in my home game, we have a character that died like a brutal death at the hands of a beholder. The death rate knocked her to 0, and she died flat out. They had to take her. The cleric is the one that died. They had to take her across part of the country to get her to the only healer they knew of that would be able to heal her back up. And when she was healed back up, her god bestowed upon her a little buddy to keep an eye on her and to help her out in the form of a black cat. So giving your players familiars is not a bad thing. It's not a game-breaking thing in any way. You, at any point, can veto I'm going to have the familiar giving the help action if it's like a split-second thing, or if you're like, okay, how is a frog going to help you pick this lock? It's not bound by just the word of the book. You can make a judgment call in the moment if you don't want the specific mechanical benefit to go with it, but players respond really well to having familiars. In our game, we have 2 familiars, 1 beast companion, and at least 1 pet in a 6-player campaign. We apparently like animals in this game, and so the players really, really enjoy having these familiars around, having these animals around. They're all first-time players, so like I said before, early players really, really like to have animals on their side for whatever reason. Maybe just because it feels familiar. Joke I didn't mean to make. Or maybe just because it's a fantasy game, so you can have a wolf buddy if you want to. Who knows? But find familiar. Check it out. Add it to your spell list if you haven't yet already. It's a really good spell, and I think everybody should take it and play with it at least one time. Yeah, that's the end of the page. I really just kind of wanted to gush a little bit about familiars because I think they're really cool, and I think that more people should use them. Not to the extent that like everybody should have them, but like more people should use them. They're a cool tool to have in D&D, and they take a really unique space that isn't actually, it can't really be filled by things like Mage Hand, even though Mage Hand also phenomenal. Anything with a lot of utility or roleplay potential has a special place in my heart already. So it shouldn't become as a surprise that like this is one that I'm like, yes, do it, use it. But that is everything that I have to talk to you guys about this morning. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you are subscribe, follow, whatever, just to make sure that I know that you guys are enjoying this and you want me to keep making it, because the more of you guys that do and follow along, the more I will know that I need to keep making this because you guys are actually enjoying it. Thank you so much, especially to my patrons, the ones who make this all possible. I really, really appreciate it. I could not do it without you. If you are able to support the show, I would love to have you. The link to my Patreon is in the description of this video. Thank you so much in advance. And again, thank you to all of my patrons, especially. Patrons can do things like suggest topics for videos, suggest homebrew things they want to see made. One of these days, I'm going to go through some of the homebrew stuff that I make, because I make a lot of it, and I really like it. And I think you guys will probably like it too if you don't already get to see it, and you'll get a little sneak peek of the stuff that you get as one of my patrons. But that is everything that I have for you guys. Once again, thank you so much to all of you, especially the patrons. Thank you for making me part of your morning routine. There we go. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Until next time, keep on rolling.